Okay.
And for the second question, maybe the most typical thing is that different states have different regulations, and this makes it difficult for the companies to specify their uses. For the third question, maybe we don't have clear laws, but we have some examples, like the use of personal photos or videos in social media. You cannot upload anything for someone else that's not you. And also for the case of social engineering, for example, when you want to take an information for like something related to banking, you cannot extract any information you want from the person.
Okay. So there is no comprehensive law in Saudi Arabia. It looks like GDPR and HIPAA.
We're not aware of that, but we know some examples.
Okay. Good. Okay. يعطيكم العافية شباب.
شكرا.
طيب the third group علي أحمد عبد الإله عبد الكريم عبد الله. Please go ahead.
Yes, doctor. I'm Abdullah Nasser.
Hello.
For the answer for the first question, we think that most of the sites they are agree on the main principles of privacy, which are notice the user, accountability, integrity, confidentiality, and the fair use of the data.
Okay.
As for the
So
second question,
most of the principles are shared.
Yeah, they are shared between all the privacy laws you have seen.
Okay.
As for the second question, we think that the privacy first Netherlands, which is link one, and it does not talk about in general idea about privacy, but does not specify any rules like HIPAA and GDPR, and also the shareholders and what is the measurement will happen. It does not have this information like GDPR and HIPAA. As for the third question, Abdul Karim answered this, that we are more focusing on cybersecurity more than data privacy. So we don't have data privacy law in Saudi Arabia.
Okay. Okay, ممتاز. يعطيك العافية يا عبد الله. والشباب والجروب جروب 3. Group 4.
My name is Mohammed Sada.
تفضل محمد.
Regarding the first question, most of the law and regulation are common. For example, accountability, consent, limiting collection, limiting use, accuracy, safeguard, and integrity and confidentiality are common. For the second question, yes, there is the limited use policy can interpret differently among the individual entities. For example, in HIPAA privacy regulation under the permitted use, the sixth point states that limited use may rely on professional ethics and best judgment. Best judgment can differ from one another. Hence, this should require individual authorization. For the third question, according to the Basic Law of Governance, Section 40, state that messages and mails are unviewable, and it shall not be delayed or listened or to view them. Other than this, I couldn't find something relating to data privacy.
Okay, sounds good. يعطيك العافية محمد والشباب جروب 4. طيب جروب 5. يحيى خاتم علي أسامة مهند. Anyone?
I guess they are still in the second group. They are on hold.
ما في إلا خاتم on hold. أوكي. طيب طيب جروب 6 محمود. لا محمود موجود. يا حسين خالد. Anyone?
No.
Group 6.
Yes, I'm here. Okay, I will take the lead here.
Okay.
Okay, regarding the first one, there is a lot of common, but I will notice some of them. One of them is the notice that they should give for the user. The second one is the consent, that the user should consent any use of data. The third one is that the user can access or edit the collected data. And the last one that we have see that anyone who stored the information is responsible for any issue that the user did not agree.
Okay.
These are not limited to this law that's common, but I have mentioned some of it. For the question 2, we have found in the GDPR a vague one that said that the data can only process should have a legitimate interest. This word legitimate interest, we believe it's too broad and it's not adequately defined.
Okay.
For the question 3, there is no specific regulation in Saudi Arabia for data privacy, but they have some regulation for four subjects, such as electronic commerce law and cloud computing framework, Internet of Things regulatory framework, and anti-cyber crime law.
Okay. So they all have some privacy or data privacy aspect.
But
right?
it is specific. Yes, it's specific for these things. But I believe there is some problems. There's some punishment for cyber leaking or something. I'm not sure about it.
Okay.
Saudi Arabia.
طيب ممتاز يعطيكم العافية شباب في الجروب 6. The last groups, the group 7, Ammar, Jihad, Abdullah.
I'm Abdullah Sheikh, and for the question 1, we think the most common concepts were the limitation of the use of the data, also the consent of the user, also inform the user, and the 3 main data privacy goals, which is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data. For the second question, we think that 2 of the 3 were general, while the third one was on the health sector. Also implementing the laws in specific sectors, abating the 2 general agreements and somewhat vague, while the health sector agreement is specific and clear. Also, the 2 general ones did not mention clear consequences regarding violations.
Okay.
For the third question, there is no a common or a general data protection regulation in Saudi Arabia, but in each sector have their own legislation and data protection legislation. Like in the banking system, we have the SEMA. Also we have the Sharia law and the e-commerce law, and they're like these laws. Yeah.
Okay. So there is no comprehensive law in Saudi Arabia. Rather, they have sectoral laws. Yeah. Okay, sounds good. يعطيكم العافية كلكم. That was very informative, and like the whole purpose of this, one of the purposes of this activity was to get you familiar with the breakout discussion and like how to go from one room to another, as well as the ability to discuss subjects with your colleagues, because we're going to do this more often. Okay, so this was kind of a warm-up exercise, because later on we're going to take a use case. In particular, we're going to talk about the contact tracing application use case, and then we're going to talk about it from different aspects, from the privacy requirements, from maybe we can propose some privacy solutions once you identify the risk in terms of privacy. Okay, so we're going to take a particular use case. So this semester I decided to be contact tracing application, something like Tabaud and Tatamman, that is used for COVID-19, as a use case to understand what is the difference between, or what is the requirement, the privacy requirement, when designing such a contact tracing application. Okay, so the plan is to have such a discussion meeting maybe every 2 weeks or so. Okay, so about 15 minutes of the we take about 15 minutes from a class every couple of weeks, and then we're going to have this discussion. Okay, so I hope that you find this at the end of the semester, you find this useful to share thoughts with your colleagues, as well as share kind of your experience with me or with the rest of your classmates. طيب, so let's get back to your response regarding these questions. I think you all agree that about 2 things, okay? That most of those principles or most of those data laws and regulations, at least they agree on most of the principles. And that is actually right. That is true, because with the data privacy principles are are common, and they all kind of were generated from common aspects or common things. This is the last time, or where we stopped last class, right? And kind of we agreed that all the laws that exist actually revolve around what is called privacy torts. Okay, torts meaning wrongful acts, like in a legal terminology, and this is a combination of legal aspects or issues about privacy, personal privacy, for maybe decades. It's not something new from 60s and 70s. It's maybe from the latest data or the oldest data that I checked when I was looking at privacy laws dates back to 1600s, maybe earlier. Okay, so last time I said data laws were developed alongside three major concepts that implicate our privacy: the media, be it traditional media like newspapers, TVs, be it social media, the current ones, the internet in general. The other thing is surveillance, whether it's governmental surveillance, military surveillance, whatever kind of surveillance, right? And the third thing is coming from alongside the personal data, the definition of personal data. What do you mean by personal data, and so on? So just give me 1 minute here. Let me use full screen. So these are the the kind of the torts that all data laws at least agree on. Okay, in spirit. Intrusion upon seclusion, and this is kind of remind us with the first definition of privacy, right? You can remind me with that. One definition of privacy, very one statement, right? The right to be let alone.
The right to be let alone.
Exactly. Sorry, I said I didn't give you a chance. So the right to be let alone, right? So this is kind of goes along that definition, the intrusion upon seclusion. But one thing that those laws kind of diverge on is what does seclusion mean, right? So the old laws, you see, for example, in Article 40 in the Basic Law in Saudi Arabia, privacy means telecommunication and postal artifacts of people. Now, when is the last time you sent something like a post, an envelope, like a message, like personal message using the post office? Okay, we all use emails now, so the technology is different. Hence, the seclusion, the definition of seclusion, this personal bubble or personal space, is also emerging with the technology. Okay. Public disclosure of private facts. So this is kind of goes along with the tashhir, misinformation and defamation, misappropriation of name or likeness. From security, there's a known security attack called identity theft, right? So impersonating someone else using his name or image or even fame to benefit yourself. Okay, so this is also a privacy. You consider to be a privacy issue, placing someone in false light. Again, this goes like rumors, spreading rumors or misinformation, which is a really hot thing in those days with the with the social media platforms and so on. So now companies are fighting these even the technologies that produce such things like deep fakes and artificial intelligence algorithm that generate hate speeches, misinformation, and so on. The last thing is coming from the service providers or the companies that give us that provide such services, which is the negligent handling of people's personal information. And this is kind of has been a problem, has been a problem with international companies as well as national companies. So you have seen all this about 2 years ago or last year, there was a massive data breach of one of the applications in Saudi Arabia that they collected, phone numbers. So that database has been leaked, and like the contacts of million people has been leaked. I forgot the name of the company. It's a like I believe it's a local application on Android. Something like Whose Number. Is it called Whose Number? What's that? Who's that? The one that like you can go and check who.
Truecaller.
Truecaller. Yeah, number book or Truecaller. Okay. Something like this, but it was local version of that, and it was all the information database database has been leaked, and that of course, because we don't have data privacy regulation to go after the responsible people. So I think there were no any, and there was no kind of any legal act on that, as far as I know. Okay, so to answer the first question, yes, they are mainly, or let's say in spirit, they share the same principles and regulations. I see one hand here, Abdullah. Go ahead.
Yes, Doctor, I have one question. If we don't have, like, for example, regulations and law, can I أقدم شكوى عليهم قضائية?
Yes, you can. But my point here is you can. But the point here is under which law? Okay? إيش الدعوة القضائية اللي تستند عليها؟ يعني مثلا, is it anti-cyber crime? But they did not do any wrongful acts with respect to that law. Is it under the e-commerce? Again, they might not have done anything wrong with respect to that law, right? However, if we have something particular like data collection, okay, did they get our consent to collect data about our contact information? Okay, probably yes, probably not. I'm not sure, but on that, using that principle and using that, like specific article, then you can ممكن ترفع عليهم قضية. Okay, basically this is the my point here. I think is because of this, because this, at least these are kind of the dimensions or the aspects that all principal laws or all data privacy laws started with. That's why we see like lots of common principles among the three, at least those three laws and regulations. طيب. So from here, because I'm sure that some of you have read it and at least you discussed it with your colleagues. I'm not going to spend so much time here. I'm just going to, like give you brief description of each of these principles. Okay. Sorry. So this is a law or regulation called Fair Information Practice Principle, or for short FIPS, FIPPS. And this is a kind of sectoral law in US made by the FTC, Federal Trade Commission. You don't have to remember all this stuff. What we care about is the, like these principles. So they have about 8 principles. The first one is collection limitation. And this is kind of self-explanatory, right? So companies should only collect data that help them in doing specific purpose for specific. That is purpose specification. Collection limitation meaning only collect the data that is just enough, okay, just enough to do whatever you want. Okay, let me give you an example. Let's say you are a hospital that has a research institute, and they would like to do research about a particular type of cancer. Okay, so they collect information or data from patients. Okay, and they did their study. Later on, okay, they decided to do research on another type of cancer. Okay, so they use the same data. So they say, no, this is a violation of principle, because the data, okay, was collected for another purpose. Again, sorry, I think I'm mixing the collection limitation and purpose specification. This particular example is for purpose specification, right? So collecting data only for the particular purpose, okay? Maybe collection limitation is, you know, like along the same example. If you're doing, let's say, about research on a specific type of cancer, then you should not collect data about, you know, like your financial behavior, your maybe let's say I don't know, number of cars that you have, okay, or maybe at which country have you been in the last five years, right? So it has to be just enough to do your research, okay? So this is the collection limitation, and you should not collect all the data and then, okay, you pick and choose which data that you're gonna use. No, you have to be you know, like transparent from the beginning. This is what I'm gonna do. This is the data that I'm gonna collect to do this stuff. The other thing is data quality principle, which is to some extent it looks like, you know, like the integrity principle of data security, meaning that the data has to be right all the time and only accessed by and modified by authorized users, right? So it has to be it has to preserve the integrity and consistency all the time. I guess I kind of explained what purpose specification mean. It means that, you know, like whatever data you collect, whatever purpose that you collected data for, you should not use it for another purpose. Okay, so only one purpose, or whatever purpose that you agreed with when you collected data. Use limitation principle. Okay, so for example, if you collected data, then it has to be used for this purpose. Then you should not, let's say, sell it later on. Okay, so collection, it doesn't mean that you own this data. Okay, so you just got the consent from users to collect this data to do certain purpose. Then you should not go and sell it and, you know, like put it in a black market and sell it to third company in order to, you know, like advertise for their new medicine and so on. Okay, so the use also has to be limited. While after the collection of data, your data has to be you know, like secured. Okay, so you apply every security countermeasure that to make sure that, you know, like the data is not being leaked. So the company that collected data should held responsible on, you know, like securing the data, whether it's you know, like in place or in transition, meaning when you, for example, moving or transmitting data from, you know, like to the cloud, storing it in your own database or storing it in the cloud, that company is responsible to you know, like take every measure to secure the data. Openness principle, okay, meaning that, you know, when you collect data, you should upfront explain what are you going to do with this data. So what type of research you are doing on it, what kind of processing. Okay, so it has to be transparent. You have, you know, the company has to be transparent with the subjects or the owners of the data. Individual participation principle. You know, whenever you collect the data or obtain the data from individual, of course they have to have the consent. Okay, so they have to agree on collecting data. If they opted to withdraw their data, okay, they have the right to do so. Okay, so they can actually remove or withdraw their data and withdraw from this, let's say, study. Okay, and you cannot use later on. You cannot use the data in this study or whatever. If there was, let's say, any data breach or privacy, okay, on the data privacy, the user that gets affected has the right to be informed. Okay, so again, this is the individual participation principle. Accountability meaning, you know, if the controller or the one that collected data has to comply with such laws, okay, and they have to have this continuous assessment of privacy and continuous assessment of all the security measures that they have in order to avoid or prevent any data breaches. Okay, so at least these are the principles. Now, if you if you want to, so I'm just listing it here, okay. But also I have it, and if you go into the slides, I just hit it. You like it is in a heading mode. So this is kind of just for your information to, you know, like to understand what does each principle mean. However, you're not, and I'm not going to ask you to kind of give me a definition of collection limitation, the entire definition. You don't have to actually memorize this. But one typical question could be, for example, what is the difference between collection limitation and purpose specification? Okay, so you should give me, you know, like concise answer from your own understanding, in your own words, about the difference between those two principles. Okay, so these are kind of questions that I usually look for. So you don't have to memorize all these statements in the slides. Now that was about kind of one sectoral law from US. Now another example is kind of one comprehensive law. Okay, so I already told you about the two approaches between EU and US. In EU, they are taking another route of comprehensive laws. So they have a specific commission. I think it's called Information Commission Office that goes after, you know, companies and check their compliance with GDPR, and if there is any violation, the ICO will go after that company and, you know, like decide what is the penalty, right? So GDPR has been, you know, like articulated maybe early 2010 or so, but it was put effectively on May 2018. And I still remember the day it was ruled out. Okay, it was, you know, put in action, because then we were bombarded with a lot of pop-ups between from all the websites, right? I don't know if you remember that. Every website we go there, you have half of the page or maybe quarter of the page disclaimer. We are using this cookie, right? Accept or not. Facebook, they have changed lots of policies, and I still remember the first time Facebook announced that now you can download all your personal data in your personal page from Facebook. It was not previously there, and this is a kind of consequence of one of the principles in GDPR. Okay, why did they comply with that? Not because it's you know, like the companies find it good to comply with, because of the penalties. So the penalties actually are significant. So you're talking about either $20 million for every breach, or 4% of the entire global revenue, and this is, you know, something huge. And the examples I can show you later on, or you can see it in the slides. I think Google, let's say, paid $200 million, no, not dollar, euro or so. Okay, so that's why, you know, most of the companies accelerated their compliance with GDPR. Khaled, do you have a question?
Yes, Doctor. My question is, Facebook is based in the US. Why they need to comply with EU regulations?
Good question. Very good question. First of all, I think Facebook has a branch in EU. So GDPR states that any company that operates or have an office in any European country, they must abide with abide with this law. And this is number one. Number two, even if you are not operating within EU territory, GDPR extends to every company that provide a service for any EU citizen. Okay, so let me say that again. If you are in a local company in Saudi Arabia and you have at least one customer from the European Union and he got affected by a breach by this local company, GDPR can go after this company. See the point? So I think they played it well in this point. So, you know, like GDPR effect is kind of spreading all over the world, not only in Europe. And that's why it's, you know, every big company actually did comply with GDPR. But not all companies complied with, for example, this FIPS, because FIPS is a state, I think it's a federal law, but within US. Abdullah, next one.
Yes, I have simple questions, Doctor.
Yes.
The penalties goes to who? The GDPR organization or the government, or to the subject that who are like affected by this breach?
Okay, yes, you are right. I think it's you know, I'm not really aware of the, you know, like compensation and so on, but I believe, yes, at least percentage of this hefty fine distributed to all the victims of this data breach. And I tell you, I think this is not this section, the other section, the graduate course. One of your colleagues said he has been a victim of one of the breaches. I forgot which breach, and they wrote him a check of $12. Okay, so but then we are saying, you know, in order to process the check, I had to pay $50 or so. So it didn't worth the hassle to go and pay. But the point here is, yes, I think at least part of the penalty gets distributed to the victims, but the major one, of course, goes to, you know, like the ICO commission, because of the all you know, like legal fees and so on, that they paperwork and effort that they have done. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
Okay. Right, and I think the point here that I forgot to mention is whichever is higher, and this is kind of bold statement that they're making. You know, like if you are, let's say, on the like of Google's or Facebook or Apple, even, you know, like 20 million is nothing, right, compared to their capital and their revenue per year. So they're also mandating 4% of the entire global revenue. I'm not really on top of the number, but I believe, you know, like, for example, Apple, let's say they're making $1 billion, or I think they're not more than $1 billion. Okay, but you know, like you can do the math. It's a hefty penalty.
Trillion, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe trillion. I don't know. I'm not sure. Right. What is also unique about GDPR that I found, at least compared to the other laws, is the introduction of one more entity, which is the data processor. So always in all the laws, they have the data subject, which is the victim, the person who owns the data, the controller, the one that collects the data. But with the emerging of cloud computing, edge computing, fog computing, whatever you call it, you know, we have a third party that processes the data. So the data collector take the data and put it somewhere in the cloud. And here they are called data processor, to process data, to store it, whatever. Now, if there is any data breach, who should be held responsible? All right, the data controller or the data processor. So they actually have laws and regulations that poses different obligations to the controller and to the processor. Okay, so here, just if you're still confused, let's say a data controller is a company that has a website to collect data from about their visitors' visit. Okay, now they want to do some kind of analytics on the you know, the visiting patterns, the counting, and so on, but they don't have the ability. So there is always this service provided by Google, which is Google Analytics. So this, I think they just link the website to Google Analytics and let Google Analytics, or the data processor now, process the data and so on. Now, if there is let's say, a breach, okay, on some user complained about his data being used unfairly, who should hold responsible? The website or Google, or both? Okay, so the GDPR kind of makes it, at least, you know, like clear who should be accountable for such thing. These are the 7 principles of data protection. Some of them are shared with FIPS, but some of them are slightly rephrased. Okay, in another way, kind of to adopt to new technologies and so on. The first principle is, again, it's self-explanatory: lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. So all data collection and processing and dissemination has to be all has to be lawful acts. Okay, so you have to sign NDAs, get the consent, legal consents, and so on. Fairness, all the information has to be used in a fair way. Okay, it means that you should not force any user to share his data in favor of giving him a service, for example, something like ransomware, for example. No, pay me something. I'll give you the service if you share your data with me. No, ransomware is another issue. It shouldn't be related. But anyways, you get the point, right? So it has to be in a fair way. Transparency. The company or each company should be open about and transparent about the use of data, the way they collect the data, how it's actually stored, what technologies, to this extent, what technologies actually they are, if they are using, what are the standards, okay, security standards that they are relying on. So everything has to be transparent. Number two, I think is again, it's common with FIPS, purpose limitation, used only for one or more specified purposes. So I'll leave it at here because I explained it. Data minimization, again, this is related to collection limitation, right, or data collection limitation, right? So only collect enough data that is required to perform certain or specific purpose. Okay. Accuracy, which is something similar to the data quality. So it has to be the data has to be up to date, accurate, and complete. Okay. So collect just enough data that characterize or that will be helpful for the purpose of your analysis, but also that give the complete picture of that person or that entity, okay, that you are collecting data about. Storage limitation is something new that I couldn't relate it with a specific principle in previous other principles. So what does this mean? It means that if I shared my data with a company, okay, to doing certain purpose, and then later on I decided to just delete my information and opted out from this study, okay? So I can't just write or tell them, okay, please remove all my data, and you should also delete it from your records. Previously, there was no principle that mandates this. Whatever is on the internet stays on the internet. Now GDPR kind of changing this. If you opted out to kind of remove your name or your profile from Facebook, now you have the right to do so. I remember previously, even if you deactivate your page and remove your page, your name still appear in the search list, but it tells you like deactivation, deactivated page. But now, if you opted to kind of remove your personal profile, Facebook should not have any indication that you had a profile before. And this is kind of like one of the problem with Facebook and other companies. We'll come to it later. Integrity and confidentiality, again, it's the can be related to data quality as well as the like the security safeguards in FIPS. Accountability, of course, is the same principle, right? So the companies have to comply continuously, comply with the law, any changes in the law, any modification, and they should also like do the practice of the exercise of risk assessment continuously. Any questions so far? طيب تفضل مهند.
Doctor, I just have one question. For example, if someone tries to delete their Facebook completely, is there any way to make sure that they don't have it, like have still some data in their servers or something?
Good point. Good question. There is no There is no way, of course, right? And the only way is, like to go about it, like from legal aspect. But even then, they can't hide this information. So this is actually my other point, or my other question. Are there any statements that are vague and, an extension to that question maybe that is difficult to check and implement? And this point that you're making is exactly one of them, right? So storage limitation, to me, it is important, but it's still vague, because I can't tell you, okay, I deleted your profile, but then in deep in my, let's say, database or whatever, I have some copies, or at least archived copies. So how to make sure that all archived copies has been deleted? That's an important point. Exactly, there are no guarantees in this, unless there have been a significant amount of evidences that this company is keeping archived data in their system. Make sense?
Yes, makes sense.
Yes, Doctor, I have just one question that, for example, how can I know as a user that my data is being used in a wrong way, or like my data is being violated? How can I know as a user?
Again, this is something difficult. Okay, it's not. Maybe it's beyond your capability to do that. Again, my answer also is the same for your question as the previous question about storage limitation. But sometimes it's clear. It's apparent. For example, let's say Google. Okay, I'll give you an example. Did this ever happen to you? Let's say you are searching for something at Google, okay, for keywords, and then you let's say open Instagram and you find an ad that is related to the keyword that you were just looking for. مين حق حصل له هذا الشيء؟ بس raise your hand.
Yes, it happened to me.
Right. So now this is very clear, صح? They are tapping on your.
يقولوا هذا الكلام.
ها؟
قول أصحابي دائما يقولوا هذه تحدث لهم هذه الحركات.
بس انت ما صارت لك؟
انا ماخذ احتياطاتي.
You have ad personalization.
دكتور بعض الأحيان أكون أسولف مع أحد من الأشخاص مثلا عن مطعم بيتزا أو شيء زي كذا، فجأة ألقاه في الانستغرام أو ألقاه في الفيسبوك.
أنا هذه دائما أصحابي يقولوا لي وأنا ما قد صارت لي. صح، في بعض الأحيان في حالات، مثلا حتى لو قلت والله مشتهي مثلا بيتزا، على أول شيء تفتحوا تويتر مثلا إعلان بيتزا، طيب. Maybe coincidence, maybe they are tapping, they are collecting, like record, more record. They're opening mic and stealing your conversation and it never happened to me, and it sounds like a little bit a stretch to me, but I've heard stories and I read stories that it actually is done. But at least let's agree on this. Most of you said, like if you write a keyword in Google, you'll have like an advertisement using on that keyword. So this is clear. This is clear. Now let's say in terms of Cambridge Analytica, right? It was a very sophisticated process. Facebook was collecting data, another third-party company was collecting data from different applications, and they started, it is difficult for a single person to observe all this, right? So it has to be, like a collective effort to find out about such a breach or such a violation. Who else? Sam, عندك سؤال? Right. Let's move on. So these are the 7 principles of data protection. I don't think we have enough time. Hopefully we can wrap up everything in this slide. These are how to comply with GDPR. These are kind of, like, because, GDPR have been put in effect May 15. So along with that, there must be guidelines, some guidelines to how to comply. Number one, of course, becoming aware. You have to, at least from the legal aspect, know what are the laws, to what extent they can go after you, and also, inform the users that you are actually gonna comply with GDPR. And this is what happens with all websites that I mentioned. Becoming accountable, okay? Make, you have to be aware of what personal data that you are keeping and collecting from your users and customers. Communication with users, so it should be users, right? So again, you have to inform the users about the personal data that you are being collected, that you have already, and so on. Inform or identify the personal privacy rights, okay? So among this data that you are collecting, are there any PIIs? Are there any personally identifiable information? If you are, let's say, doing gaming console, then maybe there is not much about privacy, okay? So you are good. But if you are, let's say, in health domain, here is okay. So you have to identify what are the privacy rights. Subject access requests. Let's say you have now, because you're collecting data, you have to give access to those users to check if their data is right, if are they is it like up to date, is it complete, and so on. Because if you fail to do so, then you're under the lawsuit. Comply with all legal bases, getting consent. Okay, if you collected data without consent, go back and update your consent data and so on. Make sure that, because children there is many guidelines about dealing with children data. Okay, so you have to identify the age range of your customers. If they are adult, that is you don't have obligation as you have for underage people and so on. So these are the 12. I'm not going to go over them quickly. And again, I'm not going to ask you to remember them. Okay, so this is you can't just for this is just for your own information. في سؤال هنا خاتم تفضل.
Regarding the principles, why not unify the principles for the whole world? Not every region has its own principles.
Good point. But again, this is a historic conflict. So I think I gave you a history between Europe and US. So it's all about sovereignty. So sovereignty, right? So let's say EU countries, they say, okay, we're gonna have comprehensive, but then US says, no, we don't have to. Every sector has. So it's all about like the constitution, about the country, سيادة الدولة نفسها تبى مش كل الدول عرفت بتتبع دولة معينة في نظامها، لا كل دولة تبى تسوي مثل نظامها الخاص. It is actually challenging to have an internationally acceptable or agreed on you remind me, okay? There was actually an incident that happened, a conflict that happened last year. Every year we have this G20 summit, right? This year it's going to be in Saudi Arabia. Last year it was in Japan, Osaka. So under the G20, there are different engagement groups. One of them is called Science 20, where they take care of like all the data governance and so on. So I remember there was an agreement called the Osaka Flow, or Osaka Flow. Basically regulate how data flow from one country to another. Meaning, if let's take the example of COVID-19, right? For example, let's say China, okay? If they collected enough data about this COVID-19 and share it, then they have to share it with, let's say, other countries, US, Saudi Arabia, other countries, about the status of COVID-19. So they wanted to regulate such regulation, okay, which is called data flow, Osaka data flow principle, meaning every country, if it is an international issue, should share enough information and enough data to all other countries. But then some countries, rejected to join this principle, and there was a big conflict in the G20. I am aware of this because I was recently involved in writing such a principle, and they wanted kind of like to complement this Osaka data flow, so it get into into action, because it's a very useful act. But you see, it's not always easy to have all the countries united in a law or something like this. See my point? So I think I'll conclude in the second slide. So this is kind of a typical information lifecycle, where you capture, you collect the data, you store it somewhere secure, you use it for your purpose, and then you destroy it, you delete it, right? So this is kind of the information lifecycle, and go on. So capture, collect data, and so on. We're going to use this information lifecycle, okay, and adopt it to GDPR principles. So first you capture data, right? And then you have to achieve or assure that all the privacy principles in GDPR is complied with. So you have data minimization, you give privacy notices, privacy rights, obtain consents while data collecting. You have to store it in a secure way. You have to keep data inventory, right? What data you are keeping, what data you are, discarding. And then you're gonna use it, and you use it limitation. You only use it with the purpose that you had the consent on, right? You should not, for example, share it with other unrestricted or unauthorized entities, for example. Once you use it, you have to destroy it, because this you have to comply with the storage limitation principle, okay? And again, the user has the right to ensure that all his records were erased. Then you have to do this continuously using the privacy impact assessment, the risk assessment, and so on. And then the life cycle goes on, okay? So this is kind of guideline or for companies on how to comply with GDPR. I think I'll stop here. So the rest of these slides are kind of some mistakes associated with complying with GDPR, okay? So they actually kind of extracted from articles. And also, next is, what are the challenges, the technical challenges in complying with GDPR principles? And here I kind of have, few points that were extracted from a research paper. The objective of that research paper is to redesign storage systems, okay, or kind of totally from the scratch design storage systems that comply with GDPR, okay? Because this is kind of existing storage systems have a lot of difficulties to comply with GDPR. And I give you just one example. When in deletion, min kan yasal Mohammed, how to ensure that data is being deleted, right?
Yes.
So this is a problem in storage systems in cloud computing. For one reason, Google does not keep one copy of your data, multiple copies. And those copies, for one of the obligation, which is integrity and consistency, has to be kind of replicated. It has to be, make sure that all those data are on the same up to date, right? And for security measure, the availability measure, right? But now you are telling me, whenever I want to delete it, you instantly delete it. No, it will take time. On average, the other paper saying, on average, it takes 180 days, 6 months, to remove a single record from Google's platform. See, 180 days. So now, when you enforce me to, storage limitation, and it takes this time because of other, either from performance or from other security measures, me as a company will get into trouble. So now, researchers started to have this idea of designing things from bottom up that complies with GDPR, and avoid patching things to existing systems to comply with GDPR. So I will leave you here. Inshallah, we'll meet next week, where we're going to wrap this up, and then we'll jump into the privacy impact assessment. Okay. If you have any questions, maybe I'll stick around for a couple of minutes. If you have any questions, And then other than that, you can, call me around 2 o'clock or send me an email. Okay? So see you next week, inshallah. Khatem, تفضل.
I have a question about the nature of the project. How is it gonna be?
Mainly it's gonna be an implementation. Okay, so pick a let's say a group, or not a group. Pick a topic. Before picking the topic, you ask me about nature. Okay. The nature is going to be mainly implementation, so it will involve some programming. Okay. Last time I gave the option of analyzing some privacy policies and so on, but I came into conclusion that is not really a great project. So the project has to be something practical, mainly going to be programming. Okay. I will provide you a set of topics. But feel free also to go and pick your own project. But I'm not going to talk about it right now because we still did not go into the technology and so on. So hopefully around week 6 to week 8, I will give you the details of the project. Ahmed. Ahmed, go ahead. Yeah.
Under which authority can the GDPR?
Right. There is one commission in Europe, I think in every country in Europe. It's called ICO, Information Commission Office. They are taking care of, the enforcing or checking the compliance of GDPR. Okay, so there is a single entity or one entity or one organization that is making sure to commission and to check the compliance of GDPR.
But how can they enforce it, like in Saudi Arabia or any country outside of the Union?
That's a good question. I don't know. يعني قصدك إنه لو في شركة في السعودية they violated this GDPR law, how are they gonna go after them?
Yes.
I don't have an answer صراحة. يعني maybe through some legal mechanism between or agreement or treaties between countries. Okay? And there are some legal treaties between, let's say, EU and Saudi Arabia. If there is any violation in this country, what is the terminology? Extradition. So you kind of using some legal systems, some legal power, you can issue Interpol requests to catch and all this legal stuff. I'm not really on top of it, but I believe it's through legal treaties between countries. I hope that answered your question.
Okay, thank you, Doctor.
Okay. Alhamdulillah.
Doctor, I have a question about right now Facebook is obligated to follow the GDPR rules or principles,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Is it only for the EU citizens or no?
Again, I think I answered. Somebody asked this question, and I answered. No, it doesn't have to be only for EU. Yeah, go ahead.
What I'm saying is, there is citizens in the EU who are protected by the GDPR, and since
Yes.
Facebook are obligated to follow these rules, so are we also included in this rules or no? Just for those people who live there.
No, it's okay. So we, as non-EU users, okay. So people from EU and non-EU, we are using the same platform. صح ولا لا? You agree? Which is Facebook.
Yes.
Right. طيب. If there are some EU users that is using Facebook, then Facebook has to comply with GDPR because there are at least 1 or 2 EU users. ماشي? Now Facebook will not develop or design 2 different platforms, one for EU and one for non-EUs, right? It's just one platform, one website. Okay. Now we're gonna be affected. We're gonna be يعني خلينا نقول احنا we will get the benefit of applying this law just because there are other EU users in Facebook. See my point?
Yes, I see it, Doctor. But this leads me to another question. Right now,
yes.
Every country or every region have their own regulations and rules. What if they contradict? There is a rule contradicts another rule in the GDPR.
Nice.
How
okay.
would they resolve this?
That's why one of the questions that I asked you is what are the common principles? Okay, and my understanding is that they are all common, at least in principle. Now, the other part of the question is, are there any conflicting principles? Okay, and up to yani my own analysis, there are no conflicting principles. The conflict is in the implementation. Okay, so yani one principle, let's say, like the way you implemented kind of contradict with the implementation with another principle. Yeah, for example, the one that I mentioned. Timely deletion and integrity. They go in collision, right? But the principles are kind of, like to some extent they match. They don't conflict. Now, this is part of my answer. The other part is, again, I'm not expert in legal and stuff and so, but I believe there are framework to take into consideration if there are any conflict between legal between laws and regulations, right? So because every regulation, when they kind of put it effectively, they have to check all other laws and regulations, either within the organization or any existing ones that can conflict with this law, and they have to resolve it. So by design, by definition of this law, it should not conflict with other laws. What I think what you're saying is, let's say in EU, there's GDPR, and in Saudi Arabia there is kind of local law. Okay, maybe the other countries don't care about. Then it's up to, let's say, it has to be resolved through this national treaties or international treaties between the two countries. Like if GDPR say they have treaties with, let's say, with Saudi Arabia, saying, okay, we're gonna put this law on effective immediately. Okay, see what laws that you have conflict with and resolve it, for example. Okay, so I'm just saying this on the top of my head, because definitely there are some solution to this. I'm sorry that I don't have a comprehensive answer to your question, but maybe we can ask somebody expert in the legal aspect, and maybe he can help us in answering. But at least
you answered me just fine. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really get it. Thank you so much.
Okay. I think we can explain it from the technical aspect at least. طيب, any other question? طيب, if you don't have any questions, so maybe I'll conclude here, and hopefully inshallah see you next week.
يعطيك العافية دكتور. شكرا جزيلا.